David Wessel is going to handicap the likely outcomes, but first, Pope Benedict holds Mass in Cuba and a surprise guest shows up. We have a live report now with Nicholas Casey, who's in Havana, Cuba. Nick, you're on the phone with us now. Tell us what's been going on.
Well, the Pope just came to Havana and gave a Mass. This is the second time only that a Pope's ever come to Cuba. So it's a big deal, and it also comes at a time where Cuba has opened itself more up to the Catholic Church. The fact is, the Cuban state doesn't have a lot of money right now. It depends heavily on subsidies from Venezuela. One of the few institutions that actually survived the revolution 50 years later is the Catholic Church. So much of the reason the Pope seems to have come is to be able to talk with the government about what role the Church plays in Cuba, what stronger role it might play in this kind of last communist country on this side of the world in years to come.
So, Nick, what's the answer?
Well, the answer I think is still in discussions here, but there's been a lot of changes which have been important. There was a time where Fidel Castro, who himself went to a Jesuit school, nationalized all church property, including the school that he had gone to. Now, because many of the Cuban schools that are out there, you hear tales of children going to school, and there's a 17-year-old teacher who's teaching them. Many of the schools are struggling. There's been a talent drain. So the church has actually gotten involved, not by opening schools, but by training teachers in how they're to do the work. The state, which is officially in charge of feeding the people, has been relying on the church lately to open soup kitchens, basically to feed Cubans that don't have enough food for themselves, which are a lot of them. So this kind of expanded role was one of the big topics of the Mass, where basically Pope Benedict, seated beside Raul Castro, told Raul Castro that he thought the church needed to have a even bigger role in Cuban life. And actually, the other day, asked him to make an extra, Catholic holiday in the calendar. We don't know what the response on that is going to be.
Nick, you're on the ground there in Havana. We see some pictures, some pretty striking images. What's your take on the mood in the streets, the reception of the Pope, and from the political leadership there in Cuba?
Well, what's interesting about a visit like this, unlike a lot of Catholic countries a lot of Latin countries where you have large populations of Catholics, is that after all of these decades of the revolution, there aren't as many Catholics in Cuba. So one thing that you hear on the streets is people coming who aren't Catholic to these masses that the Pope has held, just out of curiosity to see what this is all about. In fact, on Cuban television, they've done some kind of informational shows to tell people what a priest does and what the Pope does. So a lot of people are kind of curious about what the church is all about to begin with, which is something you don't see a lot of in Latin America, where you have a lot of Catholics.
Now, Nick, I understand that Fidel Castro showed up to meet the Pope. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Fidel Castro, who's ailing right now, no one ever explained what his sickness was when he gave up power officially in 2008, but he left in 2006 when it was supposed to be a transition time. He did meet the Pope today, and the Pope's spokesman, Father Lombardi, just did a press conference where he talked about, said they had a nice conversation. Didn't sound like it was that political. Fidel said things to the Pope like he wanted to have Mother Teresa and John Paul II beatified and made saints. So we'll see where that goes. The relationship between Fidel and the church is an interesting one, because remember, Fidel was excommunicated by the Pope years ago. So yes, this is always an interesting meeting when you see Fidel Castro meeting a Pope.
Well, and a striking image there, right? You see the Pope in all white and Fidel in, well, black.